Welcome to the Chemistry, Biology and Math Revision Hub. Today we are doing the Pearson Edexcel International GCSE Biology, Paper 1B for January 2022, Part 1. So in the Part 1 video, we have questions 1 to 4, and then in the other videos, we'll make, basically the other questions, I'll make a Part 2 as well as a Part 3. And I will put the links to Part 2 as well as Part 3 below the description box of this video. So please do not forget to look them up. Let us begin with the first question. The first question says, the diagram shows apparatus a student uses to compare inhaled and exhaled air. So here we can see there is a mouthpiece and there is a rubber tubing. So this is a rubber tubing as well as that, and this is also rubber tubing. We have lime water here and here. There is flask A and flask B. So they say, the student breathes into and out of the mouthpiece for 1 minute. Explain which flask exhaled air passes through. Now you can look, because this tube is coming from the other side and coming in, that should be where inhaled air comes in. And you can see this part comes from this side and puts in here. It means we are trying to use lime water to take away the carbon dioxide in this case as well. So air from the outside, carbon dioxide taken out, only oxygen comes in here, breathed in, and then the carbon dioxide comes out when the person breathes out, comes in here, it is going to be dissolved in the lime water. So by observing, we can see that our flask B, that is where the student is going to breathe out, basically. So again, the question asks, the student breathes in and out of the mouthpiece for 1 minute. Explain which flask exhaled air passes through. It should be flask B due to the positioning. You can check this from here. Air from outside comes directly into here, so that CO2 is removed. Oxygen comes in, breathed in by the person, and then breathing out. CO2 comes here, removed by the lime water, and then the other excess air goes out. So I say flask B because the mouthpiece is connected to a tube that goes through the lime water in tube B. Connects of the flask cannot, so in tube B basically, the contents of flask B cannot be inhaled since the person will be sucking in lime water. And I think you can see that it will be lime water coming in, so you cannot inhale that. Remember again, when the person is breathing in, this is the air that goes out. It should not be connected directly to a fluid because then the fluid will be sucked out into the person's body. The next part says, explain the changes that will happen in the lime water in flask A and flask B. It is easy. Lime water in flask B becomes more cloudy than lime water in flask A. The reason for that is exhaled air has more carbon dioxide concentration. So since this is the exhaled air, this is going to have more CO2 and therefore it's going to be more cloudy in comparison to the lower percentage of CO2 from the air. So again, here I say lime water in flask B becomes more cloudy than lime water in flask A. This is because flask B receives more CO2 breathed out from respiration than CO2 into flask A from the atmospheric air. I hope you guys understand this. I will go on to the next part. So here, the student uses lime water to compare the composition of exhaled and inhaled air, suggest an alternative substance that could be used. So here we could use bicarbonate indicator, or we could use, which is sodium hydrogen carbonate. Here we could use sodium hydrogen carbonate. And if you use this indicator, the color will be changing based on the concentration of the carbon dioxide used. The next question says, describe the role of the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles in inhalation. So talking about inhalation, the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles, when somebody is preparing to inhale, it means the lung or thoracic cavity has to increase in volume. So that means the diaphragm has to contract and flatten. Usually the diaphragm has that kind of shape, but in preparation for inhalation, it will contract and flatten to create a bigger space within the thoracic cavity. And then so the external intercostal muscles will contract. When they do contract, the rib cages are going to move upwards and outwards. And then this is the ultimate desire or the requisite for this to work. So we had to make the volume of the chest cavity to increase. These two here enable the volume of the chest cavity to increase. And when that volume increases, pressure of the chest cavity is going to decrease below atmospheric pressure, and air is going to be drawn into the lungs due to the lower pressure inside the lungs in comparison to the pressure outside in the atmosphere. This brings us to the end of question 1. Let us continue to question 2. Question 2. The diagram shows an insect-pollinated flower called a lily. This is the lily here. A1 says, which of these is the name of structure P? Structure P is that is the anther. So the next part says, which of these is the name of structure Q? Structure Q, these are petals. This is a petal and that is a petal, so this you could say a petal. Then the next part says, on which structure do pollen grains germinate? Pollen grains should germinate on the stigma, which is S, on the stigma. And the next part says, let's go to the next page. They say, describe how the structure of P, Q, and S would differ in a wind-pollinated flower. Now remember, P is the anther or anthers. They would be more exposed. This is because the wind has to be able to blow the pollen grains from the anther and be carried away, so the anthers have to be exposed. The stigma has to be more feathery and more exposed. If it's feathery, so that it can trap the pollen grains as they're blown away by the wind. And the petals, they have to be small and not brightly colored because there is no need for them to attract any insects, since it's a wind-pollinated flower. So they'll be small, not brightly colored, and they will not be scented. So one of these, whether small, not brightly colored, or not scented, would work for you. The next part says, plants can also reproduce by asexual reproduction. Give one natural. This is very important. When they say natural, give one natural method that plants use to produce asexually. Natural should be maybe runners, bulbs, combs, rhizomes, tubers. Please do not say the micropropagation, or those are not natural, so you cannot use that. Those are some artificial ways of asexual reproduction. So the artificial here we have, yes, is cutting. So they say, give one artificial method that a plant grower may use to produce a plant asexually. We can use cuttings, we can use grafting, tissue culture, we can use micropropagation. All these are possible answers. Then the next part says, suggest why a plant grower may choose to reproduce a plant asexually rather than allowing the plant to reproduce sexually. Now, remember, asexual reproduction does not cause variation, yet sexual reproduction causes variation. So if there is a particular grower who has a specific breed that is really good and they do not want any variation in it, it means they are going to continuously grow or cause asexual reproduction in order for them to produce the same desired characteristics from that particular plant or particular fruit or whatever they're trying to grow. So I said this asexual reproduction ensures there is less genetic variation, and also it's going to cause maintenance of the phenotype, meaning the same desired characteristic. So sometimes maybe they do not have the seeds. So if there is lack of seeds, there will be no option. So they have to continue reproducing that same type. And then they can do this if they want the plants to grow faster. So all these can be used. But remember, this is just a 2-mark question. Any 2 of these would award you the marks you're looking for. So this brings us to the end of question 2. Let's go on to question 3. The diagram shows a cycle found in ecosystems. So this is the cycle they're talking about here. I'll continue down here. They say, give the name of the cycle. So because this cycle involves carbon dioxide and involves fossil fuel combustion, we can say this is the carbon cycle. It should be the carbon cycle. So the next part says, which process is represented by the letter W? Let's see, W, where is it? Here. Oh, this is going to be combustion, because you can see this is a factory burning fuels, and the fuels are producing carbon dioxide that is released into the atmosphere. So that process should be combustion. Decomposition involves microorganisms. Feeding, of course, would involve animals that are feeding on the trees or so on. So this could be like feeding. If these animals eat that would be feeding. And then respiration is when these organisms release CO2 to the environment from their cellular processes. That would be respiration. So the answer here should be A. The next part says, which process is represented by the letter X? Let's see, X. Yeah, this is respiration. You can see the organisms that have already fed onto the plants are releasing the waste CO2 back into the atmosphere. That is respiration. The next part says, name a group of organisms that is responsible for decomposition. Decomposition can be bacteria, or it can be carried out by fungi. So bacteria or fungi are a suitable answer here. Let's continue on to the next page. This says carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere by the decomposition of organic material. The rate of this decomposition depends on a number of factors. Design an investigation to find out if changing the pH of organic material affects the rate of decomposition. Now, one thing we have to know is you have to know which one is the independent variable and which one is the dependent variable. In this case, we are changing the pH of the organic material. So you have to know pH has to be changed. We have to know how are we going to change it. And another key thing we have to know is you have to use at least 5 different experiments. Using less than 5 will make the results maybe not reliable because you have not varied the pH high enough, or you have not varied it high enough, so you have to vary or to make more variations in order to make your results more reliable. So this question is asking us to include experimental details in your answer and write in full sentences. So I said we need to set up 5 different experiments or 5 experiments at different pH of organic matter. When they are marking IGCSE, they consider the quorum thing, quorums, C-O, they consider the R, the double M's, and the double S. If you can fit your answers or the way you respond to an experimental question, if you can reuse these things, they will help you to ensure that you have not left out anything. So the C is for whatever you're varying. So I said set up 5 experiments at different pH of organic matter. The R is to do with the organisms. So since here we are trying to use the organic material, so the organic material has to be the same age, it has to be the same mass, and some volume if possible. So I said ensure that the organic material contains the same species. Remember, this is about decomposition, so the microorganisms, whether you're using bacteria or fungi, they should be the same species, they should be the same number, and if possible of the same age. This is ensuring that everything else is constant in order to minimize the variation and to ensure that the only variable here that is changing is going to be pH and nothing else. So R is for repeat. Repeat the experiment at each pH and find the mean. And then M1, we are measuring the dependent variable. So I said measure change in mass of the organic material by subtracting the final mass from the initial mass. And then M2 could be usually for time or for something else. So carry out all the decomposition for the same period of time. You are ensuring the examiner that you are consistent. So it could be probably a month and so on. And then S1, maintain. Here S1 and S2 are for the variables you're trying to maintain or to prevent them to change. So maintain the temperature, oxygen level constant, and then keep the amount of water and mineral ions constant, because this is decomposition. Decomposition can be altered if there is more water or if the temperature is higher, then the decomposers are going to be more active. If there is more oxygen and they're aerobic decomposers, then the rate of decomposition is going to be faster. So to ensure that all the experiment is carried out fairly or a fair test is carried out, we have to make sure the temperature is constant all throughout. All the different pH experiments should have the same temperature, same oxygen level, they should have the same amount of water, the mineral ions should be the same, they have the same type of microorganism, the organic material should be of the same mass, same age, and everything has to be consistent so that we have only one variable, which is pH. I hope you understood that. This brings us to the end of question 3. Let us move on to question 4. Question 4. The data in the table was collected in Japan during a 7-year study. Scientists collected data on the age of mothers and whether they smoked during pregnancy. They also recorded the percentage of the babies that had a low birth mass. So the data is recorded here in the table. I will refer to this data as I answer the question, so let me just go to A1 directly. They say, calculate the percentage of mothers aged 19 years and under who smoked during pregnancy. So we have to go to mothers who did smoke during pregnancy and look this side at 19 years and under. We can see there were 356 mothers who smoked during pregnancy within the 19 years and under bracket. So if we want to find the percentage of those who smoked, it has to be the number of mothers who smoked divided by the total. Total is that plus that, which you can see here, and everything times 100. When you insert this into your calculator, you get a 21.1%, which is the answer we get here. So the next question says, determine the ratio of non-smokers to smokers during used in the study, and then give a ratio to the nearest whole number. So if they say non-smokers to smokers used in the study, it means we have to add up everything. These are non-smokers and those are smokers. So the ratio is going to be that to that. So non-smokers to smokers is that to that, which gives us 11.82 to 1. Remember, they've told us to give it to the nearest whole number. So 11.8, I can round it off to 12. So it's going to be 12 to 1. That is the ratio. Part B, a student examines this data and concludes that smoking is the main factor that causes low birth mass. I use the data and your own biological knowledge to comment on this conclusion. So if they say use your data and biological knowledge, for the data you have to look at the information provided in the exam. That is where the data is. And your own biological knowledge, you have to think about the things you knew from theory, things that make sense, or things from your notes, and then you can try to write them down as well. So I said, based on the data, here the conclusion is valid. It means smoking is the main factor that causes low birth mass. Based on the data, there is low birth mass at all ages for smokers, and smokers have babies with low birth mass. So if you compare, there is going to be a low birth mass for people who smoke from the table. And then I say the research used huge numbers of mothers, I think you saw from the table, and a lot of data was collected. So using huge numbers of mothers, collecting a lot of data, makes the results to be more believable. It means repeats were carried out or everything was carried out appropriately, and the data can be believable. However, based on the data, there was more low births at under 19 years. And you know, people who are under 19 years, maybe they've not been smoking for a longer period of time. So the reason as to why they are low birth at under 19 could be something else. More there is some other factor, not necessarily only smoking, that could lead to low birth mass. So I said, more low birth under 35 for smokers and non-smokers. That was also evident from the data. So it means maybe there is another factor that may not be only smoking. I also said this shows that the effects of smoking are greater above 35. So above 35 years, effects of smoking are greater. And also said since older mothers may have smoked for more years, also there is no information about how long the mothers have been smoking. So this one here makes us not believe the data, because yes, you have said smoking is the leading cause of children being born with low birth mass. However, if you have not told us how long these mothers have been smoking, maybe some have been smoking for just a week, and therefore it's not smoking that is the collective effect causing this, or some have been smoking for more than 20 years, then that could be a risk factor. So I said since old mothers may have smoked for more years, also there is no information about how long the mothers have been smoking for. Another thing, there is no information of premature births. Sometimes the child is going to be low weight or low mass because they were born maybe at 6 months of pregnancy, meaning they were prematures. So a premature birth cannot have, a baby born prematurely cannot have the same mass as a baby who is born at 9 months of pregnancy. Also, there is no information or no information is given on the frequency of smoking. If they have been smoking for a longer period of time, how often do they smoke? How many packets of cigarettes do they smoke a day? We need all that information. Also, no detail on medical history, information on diet. They did not talk about diet, alcohol intake, drug consumption. Nothing else has been put in the data. So just solely saying that smoking is responsible for this could be an unfair statement. So we can say for some of these factors, that statement may not be valid. That statement is valid based on the data presented. However, when I use my own knowledge, I think it's not the only reason, so I have to ask questions and say there is no information showing me the frequency of smoking, no information about the premature births, there is no information about the medication or lifestyle these people are living. What if somebody is on drugs? We know sometimes drugs can lead to having children who are of low mass. We do not know what diet the mothers have been eating. Are they eating healthily? Are they eating well? Do they take alcohol? All those could be contributing factors. Another part is smoking. Smoking reduces the amount of oxygen availability. So this is correct. This is fact. It will reduce the amount of oxygen available to the child or to the fetus, and this will lead to less respiration of the fetus. So there will be less ATP production, and the less energy available for mitosis and protein synthesis. And since mitosis and protein synthesis lead to increase in tissues because tissues are made up of cells, that would lead to growth. So lack of enough oxygen will lead to less aerobic respiration. There will be less ATP available. There will be less mitosis as well as less protein synthesis. So there will be fewer tissues that are formed, resulting in less growth and body mass. This part here is telling the examiner that you know what you're talking about. Your own knowledge, you have brought out the theory explaining the process of a child gaining mass. So how do children gain mass, or how do fetuses gain mass? This is the process here you're talking about here. How protein synthesis is occurring and how mitosis accompanied by protein synthesis lead to increase in tissues, which later leads to growth of the fetus. So this brings us to the end of question 4, and this is the final question of this video. This was part 1 of this paper. I will put links to part 2 as well as part 3 of this paper in the description box of this video. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.